This year becomes the first year where matriculants have taken their final exams under somewhat normal circumstances after disruptions due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this year, in addition to the pressures brought on by the pandemic, there's been a series of challenges with pupils set to try and sneak in cell phones as well as crib notes into exam rooms in the Western Cape. A Gauteng school principal advising learners to miss 3 exams and a mathematics paper 2 with an unsolvable question. So are all these cumulative effects of the impact of COVID-19 having an impact on learners and the Department of Education? Well, let's try and get some answers from Professor Mary Metcalfe, an education specialist. Prof, a very good morning to you, and thank you very much for availing yourself. Is this anything unusual that you haven't heard of before? Unsolvable questions on a question paper, students trying their luck, sneaking in crib notes and cell phones?
You know, Dudu, I think we need to distinguish between human error and systemic error. When we have the kinds of problems that you've described, the question that we should address and the question we should ask is, are there systems in place to respond to these kinds of challenges? Should we be trusting those systems to address the problems? And in all of the instances that you have mentioned, such as seems to me a typographical or transcription error in the maths, there are systems to address that. That doesn't mean that it wasn't traumatic for the students, but I think we need to know that you have an accreditation body such as Umalusi, which oversees both the DBE and the private schools' matric exams and ensures that they're credible and fair. And I think we should really have confidence in them. But I want to move to your second question, is what is the impact of COVID in all of this? And I want to be a little bit argumentative today to say that often the public, the media, is very focused on the National Senior Certificate, the matric. And it's almost like being an absent parent who suddenly looks up and says, oh, my child's grown up, they're writing exams. Whereas what we should be doing is not having the seasonal focus on matric, but we should have a consistent look at what are the challenges in education. So, for example, this year's grade 4s, all of the evidence shows that the impacts of COVID on 2020 and 2021 and the time they've lost at schools mean that in grade 4, they haven't mastered reading in their home language, even worse than before, nor in English, which is often the medium of instruction, and the maths. So this year's grade 4s are going to be the matriculants in when? 2030? And we need to be saying, let's be present parents, let's be the present society to ensure that we get the success that we want for all of our learners by attending to performance issues in the lower grades and appropriate resourcing in the lower grades.
So, Prof, essentially catching them while they're still young, to your point of grade 4s not being able to read well in their own languages or English. So when we take a human error, you've mentioned the aspect of society and us parents playing a more active role, right, in our children's development. And then when we speak of systematic errors, how can we systematically then change this, right, and catch them while they're young to prepare them for the future?
Thank you, because what we need to be doing is, I think, relieving the public pressure as if it is only grade 12 that counts, and demanding answers and offering solutions and offering partnerships to get all of the education departments to invest much more in the lower grades. At this time of the year, people working in education are often frustrated because all of the support for the lower grades stops in order to focus on grade 12. We need to be saying, as communities, as the media, as parents, How are our grade 7s doing? How are our grade 4s doing? How can we compare how our learners are doing with learners in other schools? How can we support teachers with the challenges that they're facing? So as long as we focus on the National Senior Certificate as an interprovincial race about who's going to come top, which is utterly inappropriate, we push public attention only to the National Senior Certificates, and then these human error incidents become the dominant concern, whereas we should be saying, did children in the Eastern Cape receive reading books in the first 3 months of 2022? What access do children have to reading literature, reading books for pleasure? What's happening with the grade 9 maths? What can we do about it? So thank you for engaging me, and I know it's a little bit cheeky to come in and say, let's change the narrative. But this is what we need to do as the public and the media. Shift the focus to the years that build a successful matric.
Sometimes we need to be cheeky, Prof, in order to learn from each other, right? So it's a learning process for us as well. I do want to ask about the element, especially when we talk about perhaps the younger ones. We'll go back to the matrics in a few moments, right? So COVID-19 just proved to parents how much teachers do, how much they have to put up with, because now you were stuck at home with your little one and you had to help them with their homework, etc., etc. Then in comes the element of technology, if you will, where now children are moving away from the traditional sense of picking up and smelling a page and reading a book. Nothing wrong with it, because now you've got these tablets that have got e-books and whatever, and children are encouraged to learn. But there's a number of studies that are popping up that show that actually that is proving a little bit to be more detrimental to the children, especially if as a parent you don't pay attention and put the necessary buffers in place so that children are not exposed to harsh material. So we are dealing with things that we've never dealt with before. So what do we do where that is concerned?
A fantastic question, Lulu. So let me say firstly that when we look at the system as a whole, there's many learners who have access to reading through IT. But at the moment, because of unequal access to the resources that drive IT-based learning, it's more of a divider in terms of exacerbating inequality than really dealing with our massive systemic inequality. Secondly, you're correct that the assumption that because a learner can read something online, they don't need a process of mediation of what they're reading and interaction with adults. Many learners may be able to do that on their own, but all of us as learners need interaction with others to explore what we've understood or what we haven't understood, and to be able to engage more actively with what we've learned, which means parents and teachers have a responsibility to mediate that learning in those contexts where learners do have access to IT. To think that you're handing your child over to a babysitter or a tutor with IT is incorrect. It's a resource to support teaching and the role that parents play.
Prof, if we go back to the matric class of 2022, you've raised concern about the seasonal attention that is given to matrics. I do wonder then, when you either go look for a job, you look for internship, it doesn't matter where it is. The first thing you will be asked is whether, do you at least have a matric certificate? And so why should we not place as much emphasis on the matric certificate if we are made to understand that it is but one key to unlock one door?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. We do need to place the emphasis on the National Senior Certificate, because it is a point in a learner's life where different options into post-school education are framed, shaped, not finalized, because people can always improve. But that emphasis needs to be balanced by an emphasis earlier in the system. The DBE has been talking about introducing a general education and training certificate at the end of grade 9. Now, if, for example, And I'm not pushing to say that we should be driven by those outcome results. But if there was a general education and training certificate where we were saying, how are our grade 9s doing? What can we do to improve the performance of grade 9s across the system? One of the consequences would be we would have a lower dropout, I believe, because our very high dropout rate is a consequence of poor foundations. Intelligent and able children are not succeeding in school, and that possibly as many as 50% of them are leaving before the National Senior Certificate because of inadequate support. We're failing them. And the consequence of that is social alienation. So definitely we need to have quality last 3 years of school in grades 10, 11 and 12, but we need quality before that to build stronger foundations for matric and stronger foundations for learners to progress and not drop out. And leave school with a sense of failure and worthlessness is the greatest damage we are doing.
Prof, you mentioned the words social alienation, and something comes to mind in light of an article that was published by Ground Up. They spoke to children of refugees who are let through the education system in South Africa, and once they get to matric, they get stuck because they do not have identity documents. Please entertain me. What do we know about that, and what should we understand about that, especially with the word social alienation in mind?
Basic education and the right to an education in South Africa, which is from before school, grade R, all the way up until the year in which you turn 16, is compulsory because it's a social good. It's good for society that all children attend school. Working from that principle, it's clear that we have to be able to support children who do not have appropriate identity documents. To exclude children for any reason in those 16 years, well, up until the age of 16, is to deny their fundamental right to be able to receive enough of an education to engage in society, participate in society, belong in society, and be a critical reflector on what is happening in society and find a way to contribute with all of the challenges that young people face in contributing to an economy which isn't fully labor absorbing.
Professor Mary Metcalfe is an education specialist. Thank you, Prof, for your time this morning.